Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking time today to join us to hear more about the 2025 Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship application. All of the information that we're covering today is in the application guide, which is available for download on our website, and we will share a link in the chat. The session will be recorded and posted to the Jerome Foundation's website if you want to revisit it later. To ask questions, click the Q&A button in your menu bar. And you can click the live transcript option to have closed captioning. This is done by a computer, so it won't be 100% accurate. And a corrected closed caption will be there for the recording of this session. And that recording will be on our website on the events page. I'm Eleanor Savage. I'm the president and CEO of the Jerome Foundation, and I'm pronoun flexible. And I want to invite the fabulous Jerome team to introduce yourselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is TA. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the Minnesota-based program officers. Over to you, Melissa.
Thanks. I'm Melissa Levin. I'm a New York City-based program officer with the foundation, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Kristen Marks. I'm a program officer at Jerome Foundation, Twin City based, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, I'm Andrea Brown. I'm the Finance and Operations Manager at Jerome, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Felix Foster. I'm the Grants and Programs Administrator. Use he, him pronouns, also Twin Cities based. So the Jerome Foundation is committed to making this application process accessible. Info sessions and webinar recordings will be available, fully captioned, and PDF versions will be made available as well. The online platform for applications is Submittable, which attained a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, or VPAT. This affirms that the platform is accessible to a wide range of submitters with disabilities and follows the industry standards outlined in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. Applicants without online access or with access requests should contact Andrea regarding alternative options by April 1st, 2024. We have about 90 minutes together today and should have ample time at the end to address any questions that you may have. We will provide a brief overview of the fellowship, talk about the application process and how you can choose a field for review of your application. We'll also cover the different components of the application, which include work samples, CV, and responses to core questions. We'll include information about the notification process and, of course, have the Q&A time.
So this fellowship supports early career generative artists in Minnesota and New York City. We'll go into more details on what exactly this means in the eligibility requirements. Supportive artists take creative risks in exploring, expanding, imagining, or reimagining creative practices and experiences, reclaiming or reviving traditional forms in original ways, and are questioning, challenging, or disrupting cultural norms. And we seek to support artists who are creating, developing, and presenting imaginative work that's deeply considered, presented with technical skill, is compelling, and offers a distinctive vision and authentic voice. The application is currently open, and the deadline is Monday, April 15th by 4 p.m. Central Time or 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll be notified of your application status by January 31st, 2025. Fellows will receive $60,000 total over 3 consecutive years, which is $20,000 per year, to support their time and expenses for the creation of new work, artistic development, and/or professional artistic career development. We expect to award 45 fellowships across the 7 artistic fields you see on the screen here. Within each field, the foundation embraces and applauds interdisciplinarity and experimentation.
And on this slide, you'll see a brief overview of the steps to apply. You'll first select an artistic field in which to apply, which we'll address in a moment. You'll then be required to complete an eligibility questionnaire for a field-specific application. We recognize the time necessary to create an application, and the purpose of the questionnaire is to avoid ineligible artists investing time and energy in completing an application that cannot be considered. If you meet the eligibility requirements, you'll then go to complete the application. If there are questions about your eligibility, you'll be asked to set up an appointment with Jerome program staff to discuss. There are multiple resources available to help you prepare to apply, including a recording of the info session we had regarding the fellowship guide, pre-recorded webinars on creating an artist CV and selecting work samples, upcoming live Q&A sessions, and links to making phone calls with staff or reaching us by email. The fellowship guide has a full listing of these resources. A few things to note about completing the application. As TA said, the deadline is April 15th by 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. We also want to note here that artists may apply either as an individual or as a collaborative team of 2. Artists may submit or be part of only one application. And applications must be submitted by the applicant artists. In other words, an agent, producer, nonprofit, etc., cannot submit an application on your behalf.
To begin the application process, the foundation asks you to select the field in which you would like to be reviewed. These fields are not intended to be prescriptive. Within each field, the foundation embraces and applauds interdisciplinarity and experimentation and supports a wide range of aesthetics, forms, creative practices, and artistic lineages and points of view. The application additionally provides space for artists to share more specifically in their own words how they describe and view their own work and their goals in creating it. In selecting a field, artists, including those who identify with more than one field, are encouraged to consider their artistic lineages, their presentation contexts and experience, the work samples they plan to submit, the work they plan to pursue during their fellowship, and also which group of reviewers will be most knowledgeable about their work. The application guide contains a listing of field-specific examples of how past fellows have described their work to give a sense of the wide-ranging practices supported by the fellowship. In addition, Jerome Foundation panels are structured to include artists and arts leaders who appreciate experimentation, interdisciplinarity, and non-artistic vocabularies and frameworks. Within each field, panels recommend a wide range of aesthetics, forms, creative practices, and lineages and points of view, and you can find a list of past panelists on our website. And if you have questions about selecting a field, you can contact Jerome program staff directly.
In the spirit of transparency, we provide the review criteria and definitions to applicants as well as panelists, so that you're working with the same set of information. The 3 review criteria are creative risk, creative vision, and creative engagement and impact. You can find detailed explanations of the review criteria in the Fellowship Guide PDF, which is on our website, or this information is also in the submittable application. The panel assesses these criteria on an applicant's work samples, responses to the core questions, as well as to the work history on their CV. And panelists are asked to honor the information provided by artists. The panel will also consider the alignment among the application elements. For example, whether the work samples and the CV reflect the information shared in the core question responses, and vice versa.
Let's go into more detail on the components of the application. Work samples are field specific, and you are asked to provide 3 samples representing 3 works, projects, or bodies of work. The application additionally asks for descriptions and contextual information about the work samples. Next, you will provide a detailed artist CV. Please note that this is not a one-page resume, but rather a comprehensive listing of your generative work, complete with dates and other relevant information. Lastly, the application also asks a set of core questions that directly connect to the criteria panelists will use in their application review. You can elect to respond to the core questions via text or video, and there are recommended minimum and maximum response links. The application guide PDF includes more detailed and field-specific information related to the work samples and the artist CV.
Next, we want to go over eligibility considerations for work samples. The applicant must be the generative artist for all submitted samples, meaning that you have the rights to the work. If you're applying as co-applicants, all work samples must be the creative work generated by both and only both of the co-applicants applying. All applicants must submit 3 work samples or sets of samples, each drawn from different works, projects, or bodies of work as follows. 2 samples must be works, projects, or bodies of work created and publicly shared within the last 10 years, that's 2014 to 2024. And the 3rd sample must either be a recent work created within the last 3 years, that's 2021 to 2024, or a work in progress that you would potentially continue to work on during the fellowship. Panelists have shared that they overwhelmingly prefer samples of recent publicly shared work. And it is important to submit samples that are the strongest examples of your practice, demonstrate how you implement your creative ideas and explorations, and give a sense of the kind of work you hope to create in the future. The following are types of work samples that are not eligible: promotional videos, trailers, reels, or interviews, work created and presented while enrolled in a degree granting program or with all student performers, work in which you are a performer, interpreter, or translator but did not generate the work, and commercial or non-commercial work for hire that you generated at the direction of a client, organization, or producer, even if this is commissioned work for which you do not have primary creative control, meaning that you don't have the rights to use it, and this includes news or journalistic work.
The required work sample formats include text, video, audio, images, or some combination of these formats, depending on your selected field. You'll see a chart here with the work sample format options by field. Details and work sample requirements for each field can be found in both the application guide PDF and in the submittal application. Jerome's options for work samples are nuanced because we're attempting to offer options that reflect the range of ways artists are working. There's detailed information, especially for artists who are combining types of samples rather than a cookie-cutter approach. We encourage you to contact us if you have questions about your work samples.
For each work sample, we have fields for you to provide descriptions and context. For a work sample description, provide details about the work you're sharing, including the title of work, year completed, or year publicly shared. Also provide the location and the name of the presenting, publishing, exhibiting, or screening organization, or if the work is self-produced. Let us know the length or scale of the work in terms of minutes, pages, dimensions, and materials or medium. Include any field-specific details. For film, is it a short or feature length? For dance, is it an evening length or short work? For visual arts, is it a solo or group exhibition?
The work sample context field in the application provides space for you to give panelists context as they experience your work. In this section of the application, you have the opportunity to give a brief description of the entire piece, provide any important information about the specific section of the work occurring either before or after the work sample sequence, share your intentions and goals in creating the piece, share if and why your work might be challenging to experience on a computer screen, draw panelists' attention to specific elements of your work, and share any other notes about how to best experience the work sample. In this section, you can also point out other nuances about the sample itself. Reviewers especially appreciate artist candor in sharing any self-assessment about the work sample. An example of this might be for a choreographer submitting a work sample featuring video documentation of a live performance. They might say, "This sample best demonstrates my close work with dancers and live musicians, but there was a problem with the sound feed on the night that we did the video shoot, and you will hear some distortion, and that is not intentional." This acknowledgement that there are technical issues with the audio recording helps the reviewer note that you are aware of the problem and working on a solution. This is also where you can share if the panelists are viewing the work itself, such as a film or interactive website, or documentation of a work, such as a video recording of a live dance or theater performance. You can also explain how the work sample format might differ from a live or in-person experience of the work. Like if a project is social practice and involves live engagement, if a work is multi-channel and requires special sound equipment, if a work is durational and is intended to be experienced over several hours or days, if the scale of an object is not apparent from the image, or if there are special instructions for a reading order in a literary sample. We strongly encourage you to be as forthcoming and descriptive as you can.
For each work sample, you are asked to provide cue points. Panelists prefer to see uninterrupted stretches of time-based work. We ask you to provide a link to the full documentation and then use the cue points field to direct panelists' attention to a single sequence within the work. Only provide one cue sequence per work, not multiple short sections within a sample. For text work samples, you'll upload the full-length manuscript or script and then indicate start and end page numbers for one sequence within the work. Cue points do not need to be equal for each work. For example, you might indicate 5 minutes for your first work sample, 4 minutes for your second work sample, and 3 minutes for your third work sample. For image work samples, you'll want to upload the images in order you want them to be viewed. In addition to images of individual works, installation views and detail images are accepted. In a separate field in the application, we ask you to identify your role in the work sample. You should note your generative role, as well as any additional roles you played in the work. For example, choreographer and performer, director and designer, author and editor, playwright and actor. This information should align with what you have in your CV.
Please select work samples that highlight how your creative practice and work aligns with the fellowship's review criteria of creative risk-taking, creative vision, and creative impact and engagement. Work samples are a direct way for panelists to understand your creative expression. The panel is asked to consider if the work samples are taking creative risks in exploring, expanding, imagining, or reimagining creative practices and experiences, reclaiming or reviving traditional forms in original ways, and or questioning, challenging, or disrupting cultural norms. Additionally, is the artist creating, developing, and presenting imaginative work that is deeply considered, presented with technical skill, is compelling, and offers distinctive vision and authentic voice? And excuse me. And lastly, is the work effective and engaging in its use of structure and aesthetics, providing artistic experiences that communicate unique perspectives and invite viewers to question, discover, and explore new ideas in new ways? The panel will also consider the alignment among all application elements. For example, whether the work samples reflect the information shared in the core question responses and vice versa.
Let's talk about our CV requirement and how the CV is used to help determine your eligibility for the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship application. Your CV will be reviewed to determine that you are a resident in the state of Minnesota or in the 5 boroughs of New York City and have been for at least 1 year prior to application, and that you have a 2 to 10 year history of creating and presenting your own new original work. An eligible artist's CV should reflect no more than 10 years of credits for creating their own original work. For this application cycle, that means no credits earlier than 2014, and no less than 2 years of credits. That means you do have credits dating back to at least 2022. Your CV should confirm that you are not currently enrolled in a degree-granting program. If you have completed any formal degrees, such as a BFA, MFA, or PhD, you should list both the enrollment and graduation dates in the education section of your CV. Jerome staff reviews both the start and end dates for any completed degrees to help determine eligibility. And artists currently enrolled in any degree-granting program are not eligible to apply to this fellowship program. It is also worth mentioning here that if you are a tenured professor, you are not eligible to apply for this early career artist fellowship. And please note that any applicant who does not provide detailed information in their CV will not be considered beyond the eligibility review stage.
The Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship requires a CV, not a one-page resume, because we want panelists to have a comprehensive understanding of your artistic work over time. This fellowship is focused on your work as a generative artist, so it's important that this information is clear on your CV. Please include a clearly labeled section of your generative work. Generative work is the new original work that you have conceived and created from conception to presentation and for which you have the rights. Your generative work should be presented separate from lists of other artistic projects in which you have participated. Don't combine everything you've done in a general heading like artistic experience. For example, in dance, don't mix works that you choreographed with work in which you were a dancer. In theater, if you are a playwright, don't mix the plays you've written with plays in which you've acted. In addition to listing your educational credits with enrollment and graduation dates, if applicable, in your generative work history, you want to include your work in development or under contract, your collaboratively created work, your other artist activities, your fellowships, awards, and commissions, project grants or funding history, residencies, curatorial or producer work, non-generative creative work, and arts-related teaching-related employment or work for hire experience. It's key for panelists to know your past and present creative experiences, what you're working on, and where and how you're directing your creative energies, your accomplishments and awards, who is supporting your work, and who you're connected to. Co-applicants must provide individual CVs for each artist listed in the application and demonstrate a clear history of presenting work collaboratively. Please be honest in your CV. Do not add or omit experience to qualify as an early career artist. Applicants will be required to affirm the accuracy and completedness of their submitted CV. Artists who omit any aspect of the full timeline, including dates of their educational experience, work as a generative artist, or the full range of their awards and prizes will be removed from further consideration if omissions are discovered.
Applicants may choose to respond to the core questions via written text or video. We urge you to use the format where you feel you can make the strongest and most authentic case for your application. In both formats, the core questions are the same, and limits on word count and time are intended to give all applicants equivalent space to respond. As you can see in these screenshots from the application, the core questions are connected to one of the 3 review criteria, so keep that in mind when creating your response. Whether responding in writing or by video, please make sure you address all of the questions for each topic. Both text and video responses have recommended medium and maximum lengths. The panel is not required to read or view beyond the suggested maximum. We urge you not to exceed these maximums.
You're muted, Kristen.
You're muted, Kristen.
My apologies, everyone. Next, the application asks a series of questions relating to the 3 review criteria. The first question's criterion is creative risk. Inspired by the Foundation's core values of innovation and risk, this fellowship supports artists engaged in creative risk-taking, whose work is exploring, expanding, questioning, experimenting with, or reimagining artistic forms, practices, and/or approaches to creating original artistic work. This includes artists who are reclaiming or reviving traditional forms in original ways, and/or questioning or challenging the status quo in their field. This criterion is about your intentions in your work. To assess this criterion, the panel will review the work samples and the responses to these questions. What creative risks are you taking? How and/or what are you engaging, questioning, challenging, reclaiming, reviving, and/or reimagining?
The next criterion is creative vision. The fellowship supports artists who are creating, developing, and presenting imaginative work that is deeply considered, presented with technical skill, is compelling, and offers distinctive vision and authentic voice. This refers primarily to the experience of the work. Panelists are asked to consider who an artist is, the context of their work, what makes this an especially opportune time for a 3-year fellowship, and if they are self-aware of the strengths and opportunities related to their artistic development. This criterion is both about what the artist has achieved in their creative explorations and what they seek to understand. To assess this, panelists will look at your responses to 3 core questions. First, what are the key questions you hope to explore through or about your work during the fellowship? What subject areas, thematic focuses, social concerns or aesthetic styles, forms, or practices are you working with? Second, what is your artistic lineage? Who are the other artists, arts leaders, or organizations, and/or forms of work that have influenced your work and on which you are building? And how does the content of your work connect to your identity and history? And third, what are you discovering in your work? What are your strengths? What are the areas you wish to devote more time and attention to move your work forward? Are you looking to expand or learn new technical skills, research or engage with new ways of practicing your work, explore new aesthetic styles, or develop your creative content? And what makes this an especially opportune time for this 3-year fellowship?
And last but not least, the third criterion is creative engagement and impact. Inspired by the Foundation's value of humility, this fellowship supports artists who embrace their roles as part of a larger community of artists and citizens, and who consciously work with a sense of purpose and responsibility. This fellowship supports artists who have clarity around both their creative goals and the strengths and opportunities that drive their explorations. This criterion is about connection, engagement, and the impact of the artist on their field and/or creative community, as well as the potential impact of the fellowship on the artist. Panelists look at the CV and the responses to 2 core questions for this criterion. These are: 1, what are the specific social or artistic communities, participants, or audiences you seek to engage, inspire, and impact through your work? What is your current relationship with or connection to these communities, and what is the desired impact? And what are your strategies for fostering meaningful connections? And 2, what are your goals for this fellowship? What impact do you hope it will have on you and your work?
There is an additional question, text only, for those applying as co-applicants. Describe each of your roles in the creative process and how your collaboration is structured. Does each collaborator wear multiple hats or change roles depending on the project?
Jerome Foundation seeks to be inclusive and accessible to all individuals and serve a diverse range of artists. For this reason, we request information about your identity to help us know whether this program is achieving its objectives. We invite you to first share the words that you use to communicate who you are and your experiences, including but not limited to how you position yourself culturally, sociopolitically, geographically, in terms of class, education, health, citizenship, immigration or refugee status, language, parental status, marital status, rural or urban, ideological, spiritual, or religious background. This is your opportunity to center those parts of your identity you find most powerful and salient, far beyond what most standardized questionnaires may ask. That said, we also participate in larger regional and national research efforts that use more standard categorizations. We therefore ask that you to complete the checkbox questions around race, ethnicity, gender, sexual identity, and age. We also ask for your contact information.
Before you submit your application, you must affirm that all information in the application is accurate and complete, and the information in the CV is accurate without omissions or additions. Individual applicants are asked to affirm they are the sole author of the submitted work samples, hold the intellectual property rights for the work samples provided, and are authorized to submit the work samples provided. Co-applicants are asked to affirm that they are the co-authors of the submitted work samples and together hold the intellectual property rights and are authorized to submit the work samples provided. Co-applicants are also asked to affirm they have both reviewed and affirmed the accuracy of the responses.
After you've submitted your application, you'll see a confirmation page and you'll receive a confirmation email. The email has a link to a quick survey asking for your feedback on the application process. This is completely anonymous and we'd really appreciate your feedback. All applicants will be notified about their application status, indicating whether or not they have advanced to the finalist stage no later than November 21st, 2024. All finalists will be notified of their application status no later than January 31st, 2025. Please note that all correspondence regarding your application status will be done using Submittable, using the email address connected to your Submittable account.
And before we get to your questions, we want to let you know about some upcoming live events. You can find this information on our website on the events page. On Monday, March 11th at 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon Eastern, and Wednesday, April 3rd at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, we will have a live fellowship Q&A session. These are open office hours where you can bring your questions and listen to other applicants' questions. These live sessions will not be recorded. There are also recordings available of the Fellowship Guide Overview info session and those pre-recorded CV and work sample webinars we've mentioned. And all recorded sessions will be available on our website on the events page.
You're muted, Eleanor.
You're muted.
Boy. Okay, here I am. Remember that fellowship applications are due Monday, April 15th, 2024, before 4 p.m. Central or 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We want to emphasize that our deadline is not midnight. And this is so that we can be available to support any issues around submission during working hours and before the deadline. Once the applications are submitted, they may not be edited or updated, and late applications will not be accepted, and incomplete applications will not be considered. All right, it looks like we have some questions already in the Q&A, so please type in your questions there so that we can address them.
Great, I'll start with one question. If you are a multidisciplinary artist, can you include a sample within the discipline you're applying within, as well as another sample from another medium? An example, a music, auditory, video, as well as a poetry manuscript.
No, you have to guide your application within a particular field. But let's say you have a video that shows a live performance of your work that combines music, auditory video, as well as your poetry. That would be a totally acceptable work sample that can be reviewed by a multidisciplinary focused music panel. I think the problem with combining completely separate work samples is that a poetry manuscript is going to be best reviewed by poets or people that are working in the literary field, whereas a music, auditory, video is going to be best reviewed by a music panel. So you want to think about having samples that can be understood and evaluated, reviewed by panelists in a field.
Let's stay on work samples for a moment. Would a novel completed in 2023 and acquired literary representation in 2023 work if it hasn't been formally published yet?
It sounds like from what you describe, it sounds like if the work was completed but not yet publicly shared, that it could be your third work in progress sample, which has to be recent work, that could be work that you plan to be working on during the fellowship. And we just want to be clear that, publicly shared can be in any number of forms. So if this is work that you have shared in a reading or in excerpts or in any other forms, that would also count as publicly shared. And then it could be any one of your work samples.
If your degree is not related to your art practice, meaning like a general liberal arts college degree, not a fine arts degree, should it still be included on the CV? And does the date of your degree affect eligibility? This person asking has a general liberal arts BA from more than 10 years ago, but it's unrelated to their artistic practice.
I think you can include it on your CV. It doesn't sound like it would affect your eligibility in terms of, you know, if it was prior to 10 years ago, but it might be, you know, just good information to include.
Our past and current MCAD, that's the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, Jerome Emerging Artist Fellows, can they apply for this round or at all?
Yes, you can apply. Only artists who have received this specific fellowship, the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship. You can only receive one of those in a lifetime. So if you receive that, you're not eligible. But if you receive funding through another Jerome funded program, you are eligible. The one thing that you want to be aware of is that you can't, we call it double dipping. You can't use the fellowship funds from MCAD to support the same costs as the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship.
But that would be something that we would kind of work with you on, you know, as
Understanding,
we get
yeah.
to the planning part of your fellowship after it was awarded. At what point do you contact the staff about an interview around eligibility?
Take this one. So as part of the steps to apply, you'll need to first select a specific field to apply in, and you'll from there complete an eligibility questionnaire. From there, if there are any gray areas, the survey will indicate whether or not you'll have to contact Jerome staff, and there'll be information on how to set that appointment up. If you complete the eligibility questionnaire and you meet all the criteria, that the survey should bring you to the full application. And no interview or phone conversation with staff will be needed.
And those appointments are available now. You can schedule those now.
If you apply in the theater, performance, and spoken word category, but your primary practice in this category is playwright, can you submit excerpts from play manuscripts that have been performed publicly? This person is saying, some of my plays have been performed, but not filmed. Is video required as a work sample type in that theater application?
You can do video or text, meaning the manuscript for the play that's been publicly performed. So either or. But script excerpts are a completely acceptable and eligible sample.
A question about residency. Does 1 year of residency in New York City or Minnesota have to be as of April 1st, 2024? This person moved in August 2023 and is wondering if they're eligible for this round of the fellowship.
It does have to be as of April 15th, 2023.
What counts as public presentation for a film or video work?
I can take this one. There's a lot of different ways that your work can be publicly shared. So for film video, this could be an online screening, it could be an in-person screening. There's many ways, online screenings can be, if that was curated or if it was a festival format. We're very open to the ways in which work is publicly shared as long as it is publicly shared as a requirement for the work sample. And these can be, with artistic audiences and community, however it is that you generally are seeking to engage the public or engage audiences or community with your work. And I'll just reiterate that if you do have questions about the eligibility of your work samples, you can go ahead and directly set up a phone appointment with Jerome's staff, and we can talk with you about those.
I'll just add to that, it should be an intentional effort in sharing. So just having your work on your website is not that kind of intentional public engagement that Melissa was referring to. So, there are many curated and juried online experiences that are out there for filmmakers to share their work. But there has to be something intentional about the way that you're sharing it.
And just to add on to that, it doesn't necessarily have to be within like a film festival context either. If you're sharing your work by showing it to community groups or, as part of a library series, it doesn't have to be like, a Sundance movie to count as having been presented publicly. It's just you kind of taking your work out to a community and finding an audience for it. I have two questions here that I'm going to ask at the same time because they're really related. So the first is, I've had a career in various professional capacities and have been making art for longer than 10 years, but only with an art project kind of here and there. My full-time art project practice only started in 2017, as reflected in my residencies and exhibition history. Am I still eligible? And then there's another question related to kind of how are the 10 years counted? If I put out work more than 10 years ago, but it's been a little sporadic, or I've stopped making art for a long period and only started up again more recently, how do I count towards those 10 years?
I can dive into this and then, Andrea, leave those questions up, please. So let me just start with how the years are counted. It doesn't have to be consecutive, and more frequently than not, it's not consecutive. So we're looking at the total. If you are taking 2 to 3 years off, and that's legible on your CV, we wouldn't count those years off as part of the 10-year total. So what we're looking at is what is the time where you've been actively and legibly recognized and engaged in making your own original work. So that's what we're looking for in terms of starting the count. And I would really want to see the CV of the person who's had a kind of project here, project there. It'd be much easier for us to evaluate if you make an appointment with one of the program staff to take a look at your CV and walk through that with you.
I'll just add that in almost any case where the 10 years are non-consecutive, the eligibility questionnaire is likely to send you to the link to make a phone appointment and have you upload your CV and talk with one of the Jerome program staff, because each of these instances, contain a lot of idiosyncrasies, and we're available to talk through those and hear about your specific circumstances.
I have a question more about work samples. So this is kind of going back to a multidisciplinary artist. If the poetry manuscript was simultaneously a musical text score for an improvisation, I'm going to assume that would probably be okay for applying for it within the music category, as long as that's clear for the music panel. This person is sort of citing in their lineage like the flavor of Pauline Oliveiras's text scores that look a lot like poetry, but are instructions to a group musical experience or form of musical composition?
Yes, of course. You do have the option to upload both audio recording as a work sample and the score. And the score can be however you are scoring. So that musical text score could be uploaded. And a big fan of Paulina Oliveras.
I'm going to lift a question out of the chat here. If I'm a multidisciplinary artist presenting both documentary film and live dance performance, should my work samples include both or only one of those strands of work?
I can attempt to answer this. We encourage strongly for work samples to include your strong and best work. And so we also recommend, because as a requirement you have to apply for one field, we'd recommend that you reflect on your artistic lineages, who are the other artists or arts leaders, organizations, or forms of work that have influenced your work the most, and on which you're building. And I think another helpful way to think about this question and what to submit for work samples is the panelists are going to be really steeped in their discipline. So thinking about who do you want to receive and experience your work sample, who might it be best understood by, if that makes sense. And I want to just open it up to Eleanor or anybody else.
Well, I was saying, where are you going with your work? Are you focused on documentary film? Are you integrating film and live dance? That could play a big part in which direction you want to go. What's your background and your history and your education and training and all of that might be factors as well.
Are creative nonfiction pieces that were published in a news outlet or magazine fair game for submission?
As long as these are your creative work, then they are eligible work samples. So just to say, we have the requirement that the work can't, be a commissioned work or news or journalistic work. It has to be your creative work that you conceived of and developed and completed and have the rights to and had full creative control over.
If I made some work with a collaborator, but I'm submitting an application as an individual, should I include that collaborative work as an FYI so that you know?
Yeah, you can include that on your CV. I would make sure to separate it as, just a separate header saying collaboratively created work, and list it there.
I think maybe to be extra clear and just add a sentiment that work wouldn't be eligible as a work sample. So if you are applying as an individual, though you can list it on your CV in a separate and clear section, it wouldn't be eligible as a work sample because you have to be the sole author and lead generator of the work that you're submitting.
And just a heads up, this is the last question that we have in the queue. So if you have any other questions, I'd urge you to put them in the box now. Where do you think social practice art fits in, as this work can take many forms?
Yeah, and we've actually supported it in in different fields. So we've had people apply in visual arts. We've had people apply in theater. We've had people apply in technology-centered work. So I would say, what is the background that guides you into the social practice work that you're doing? And that might help give some clues as to, what's the best field, and also that other question of where are you going with that work moving forward.
Another thought is that it could be helpful to look at past fellows and panelists and see, or I guess actually focus on past fellows and see if there's anyone whose work you resonate with, where you would think like, oh, this is, within the same lineage, and you would want to think about, being in that same field.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about it, we've also supported choreographers who are working in social practice.
I see that there's a raised hand, and I'm wondering, I don't want to like put anybody on the spot, but if you did raise your hand and you have a question, I'd just encourage you to put that in the chat box or the Q&A. I've got one more question here. If a work includes a film of a performer, so the film, the concept are mine, but the performer shown is not me, that sounds like this doesn't count as my work.
Well, many people don't perform in their own work. So I would have a few more questions about what's the name, like if this is your film and concept and you have the rights to it and are showing this as your film, then that would count as your work. But if you documented, let's say you documented the performance of another artist and they have the rights to that work, then that wouldn't count. Feel free to ask more questions if we're not addressing what you're trying to address.
And just a reminder that those phone appointments are available, both for a question if you kind of yourself are eligible to apply for the program, but also if you have questions specifically about your work samples that you might want to include in the application, because you'll want to make sure that those are eligible so that your application can be fully considered. I do have another question here asking for clarifications on what does generative work mean?
I can start us off here. When we say generative work, we mean new original work that you have created from concept to realization. And we think about it also as not being, for example, interpretive work, not being translation or a remounting of an existing work. But specifically, the foundation directs support to artists who are creating new original work. And this is where we come to the term generative.
And if it helps, in the application guide itself, there are some like field specific listings that kind of defines like, here's what it would look like, some words that we would use to describe generative work in this field versus here's some, aspects or parts you can play in a field that wouldn't be considered generative work by our standards there. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that kind of specific to the field in which you might apply, and that could provide some clarification too.
And again, that's in the fellowship guide, and the link for that is in the chat.
I'm not seeing any further questions.
I was going to say a reminder that we do have the recorded sessions as well that talk more specifically about work samples and will go along with the application guide. And then we have a recorded session on the CV as well. You'll want to make sure that you have that all together before you schedule one of those application eligibility calls.
And this is probably a good time to say that, you know, we're here. We're here to answer your questions. And so whether that is, you know, by setting up one of those phone appointment calls, or if it might be a little simpler and just be like a quick email that you want to send to someone, our contact information and all of that information is in the fellowship guide, and it's on our website as well. So we do want to be very available to you as you have questions. And ideally, you will ask those questions before April 15th, so we can get that settled for you before the application deadline.
Looks like we have one more question.
For the third work sample, being a work in progress, if it hasn't been publicly presented yet, is it still eligible as a work sample?
I can take this one. Yes, it would still be eligible as a work sample. The works in progress, sometimes people submit the thing that they're going to work on within the fellowship. So it's definitely not something that has to have been fully done for the work sample. It's a work in progress, and it's often really exciting to hear more about that in the written or video information that you submit to. It helps engage the panelists as well. So.
I have a question from the chat I'm gonna lift out. When you say CV, is there a like specific format for that?
Yes, well, we would highly encourage you to take a look at the CV webinar that is on our website. It's recorded. We go over in detail the different sections for formatting, the sections that we encourage you to include, the kind of detailed information that's really important that you have on there as well. And Andrea just dropped the link to where you can find that recording.
And I will say that there's not like a standardized, like you don't need to take what you already have as your artist CV and like fit it into a certain format for us, but it's definitely worth checking out the information just to make sure that the information you have in your artist CV is full and complete and kind of gives us what we need to determine your eligibility, and then also gives panelists what they need in the review of their application. Going back to the work in progress, can it be more of a teaser?
No, we specifically don't. That's not an eligible form for a work sample. The panels really want to see an uninterrupted sequence. I mean, it can be very raw in terms of the form. It doesn't have to be fully produced, but it shouldn't be like a cut together series of clips.
Question here. I just finished an MFA, and what I'm working on is connected and continuing that research and work. So what exactly is disqualified or qualified when it comes to kind of work samples related to an MFA?
I can start us off with this one. So, first and foremost, you'll have to demonstrate at least 2 years of generative artistic practice. So that would mean that if you're just finishing an MFA, that you have 2 years of practice, maybe before that MFA completion. So just say that. And then as far as work samples go, if you are continuing work and research coming out of an MFA program, while you can't, it's not eligible to submit work samples from your time in the MFA program if it's work that you're continuing to do and there's another way that you have publicly shared it outside of your school context, then that work may be eligible as a work sample. So let's say you took the work that you created during your MFA program and you showed it in some other context, whether that's a museum or a theater or even through online, or it got published in a journal, again, outside of your academic context, then the work sample could be eligible.
I'm going to take my chance here and say I don't see anything else in the Q&A or the chat at the moment. We'll give folks maybe another second to raise their hand in that way.
Well, we definitely want to thank you all for making time for the session today. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us with further questions as you are thinking about and potentially working on your application. We do encourage taking advantage of the resources that we've shared, and we wish you the best with your process.
Thanks everybody for your time today.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.